Hello, everyone. I feel like being in Buenos Aires. It's an honor for me to have been invited here today by the Liberal Institute and all the organizers to be awarded the Wilhelm Röpke Award, which honors one of the greatest representatives of liberalism of recent history. Everyone here knows that Professor Röpke, who grew up and studied through destructive force of inflation. After the First World War, Germany went through long periods of inflation as it abandoned the gold standard and dedicated itself to issuing trust papers without backing the fight to finance the war. The war continued to print stunts, which ended up leading an inflation that took the exchange rate against the mark in the space of 2 years, the dollar, from 60 to 4.2 billion in Spanish, trillion in English. That is 4 and a 2 and 11 zeros. 4.2 trillion. That is a 4, a 2 and 11 zeros. Mrs. said that as long as socialists continue repeating their lies, we have then keep repeating the same truths. For example, monetary nature of inflation. That's why it's hard for me, man. The mere number, yes, it's truly shocking that we have to discuss these certain things. All this motivated William to dedicate his life to understanding to inflation and reading the teachers and teaching what the theories were teaching him, the theoretical foundations, and what was the great German economic miracle as and they were accused of making inflations intentionally and the phenomenon under expansionism or injecting liquidity. Why am I telling all this? For two reasons. First of all, because I find it admirable the conviction with which he defended his reason, honesty and common sense in the midst of the moral decadence and intellectual dishonesty that reigned at the time, even when he was facing one of the most statutory regimes that our species has ever known, which cost him exile. I wish there were more Wilhelm Röpke amongst us who defend what is correct and true without fear of reprisals from a totalitarian majority. Because St. Augustine said, what is right, even if no one does it, while what is wrong, even if everyone does it. Secondly, because several parallelisms catch my attention without intending to get to the height of a man like Röpke. I find it curious that just so many years ago in Germany, today the world talks about the Argentine economic miracle for having revolted to the exact basis, the fiscal austerity and monetary rigor. Fiscal austerity as a form of respect for citizens who pay their taxes by force, given that a leader cannot squander the citizens' money as if it were infinite, and monetary reliability so as not to defraud the population with currency lordship by issuing bills as if this had no consequence, or even as if it were beneficial, as some fiscal degenerates try to make us believe. I also find it curious that simply doing things well is considered a miracle, because nature must notice that it is doing things wrong, and that is simply a tragedy. In fact, there is a very interesting phrase by Thomas Sowell that says that The first law of economics is scarcity. That is to say, there is not everything for everyone, and the first law of politics is to ignore the law of economics. In the words of the own Ludwig Erhard, we can see the economical miracle. And the economical well-being is not a miracle, but the consequence of the honest effort of an entire people according to principles of freedom. When you have been given the possibilities to use your human initiative and your human energy, that is why I hope that what we call today the Argentine miracle spreads throughout the world as a germ that multiplies wealth, and that is why I want to briefly tell you about our experience during the first year of our presidency. At the beginning of our administration, we had 15 points of consolidated fiscal deficit, of which 5 were in the treasury and 10 were under the rug of the central bank. The deficit was the origin of all our evils. In other words, without a deficit, there is no debt, no emission or inflation. After having made the biggest adjustment in human history, today we find ourselves with a sustained and default-free super fiscal for the first time in the last 123 years. At the same time, at the beginning of our management, the inflation rate was traveling at a rate of 17,000% annualized at the wholesale start. Today, the same annualized start is traveling at 10% annually. That is to say, we dropped 1,700 times in inflation, and we are getting closer every day to it being just a bad memory. As a direct consequence of having annihilated inflation, we reduced poverty to 54% in the first quarter of 2024 to 38% in the third quarter, and we trust that this path will continue. In fact, the monthly frequency data is already at 36%. That is to say, we've reduced poverty by more than 21,000 on a monthly basis, which means that we have lifted more than 10 million Argentinians out of poverty. At the beginning of our administration, the exchange gap between the official dollar and the free dollar was 180%. Today, the exchange gap is practically dead, and we work day and night to finish cleaning up the central bank's balance sheets to be able to lift the exchange rate once and for all. During 2024, we saw a strong appreciation of our currency, something almost unprecedented for our country, which caused the average basic salary to grow from $300 to $1,100. At the beginning of our management, we had a country risk of 1,900 points, which was even higher, since at the time we had won the election. It was between 3,000, and the sovereign bonds were trading between $20 and $35. Today, the country risk is close to 600 basis points, and our bonds are already around $70. Lowering the country risk at this rate allows us to lower the interest rate of our economy, which we have already lowered from 133% to 32%, thus improving the ability of Argentinians to access cheap credit, facilitating inversion and job creation, which is why during 2024 we saw a credit boom and mortgages without comparison in our history. That is, we went from discussing hyperinflation to discussing loans, mortgages, and 30-year mortgages. At the beginning of our administration, our economy was first due to regulations that complicated lives for everyone and scared away any investors. Today, we have already eliminated more than 900 regulations at a rate of more than 3 times per day. And if you consider that the Ministry of Regulation began to act in the middle of the year, it means that we're basically producing about 6 regulations per day. At the same time, the Bayes Law and Denemu 70 as a whole have made the largest structural reform in Argentinian history, 8 times larger than what President Menem did in the early 90s. And I say something to those who want 3,200 more structural reforms, and we are going to make Argentina the freest country in the world. At the beginning of our administration, Argentina was a global example of everything that should not be done or said. Today, we are seen favorably by investors and citizens around the world, to the point that we went from being one of the countries with the worst economic results in the last 40 years to be one of the best that is projected for the next 40, and that growth projection is sustained for various reasons. First of all, the economy went into a cyclical phase. We see a point of salary. Firstly, the economy has entered a cyclical recovery based on 2 factors. On the one hand, we have seen a sustainable rebound in real wages and pensions due to the collapse of inflation. On the other hand, companies normalized their foundations after being overstocked throughout 2023 as a result of the inflationary spiral. These 2 cyclical phenomena have energized our economy and explained the growth phenomenon of the last quarter of the year. Have an idea that the latest quarter data is 3.9, which they have made 17%. The Argentinian economy has been traveling at an incredible pace. Furthermore, we have the 15 points of the that we adjust, and by definition we return to the private sector in the form of savings, which generates an increase in both investment and the consumption. In addition, another factor is added, which is the lowering of tax burden. That is due to the elimination of the inflation tax, or the reduction of taxes that we have already started and are going to deepen during this year. In fact, yesterday we announced the elimination of withholdings for regional economies, and we have initiated a reduction of withholdings for the main agricultural products. That is why we are working on a structural tax reform to reduce the amount of national taxes by 90% and return to the provinces the taxes that they have lost and should never have lost, to give them back their autonomy. Thus, we aim to achieve a federalism marked by fiscal competition between our provinces to see who attracts the most investments in this matter. Here in Switzerland, they have several decades advantage to us. They are several decades in front of us, ahead of us. A mess that should never have existed and that this year ends once and for all. I repeat, a mess that should never have existed and that this year ends once and for all. To this end, we are working on different alternatives to provide a definite solution to a problem of the central bank's stock, and in the sense of meeting with the IMF that we have had, Washington have been positive. This is a barbarity that should never, ever, ever have taken place. And I will repeat, it's a barbarity that should never have taken place. This is why we are working with various alternatives to find a definitive solution for the stocks in the central bank. In this sense, it was very positive to have met up with the IMF in Washington in parallel in order to close the central bank as we have promised and thus end inflation forever in our country. We are moving forward.
Si fuera populista hubiera hecho el punto para que justamente pasara esto. No lo hice, pero pasó igual. El orden espontáneo es maravilloso.
If I were a populist, or I had made the point for this to happen, I didn't do it. But it happened anyway. The spontaneous order is wonderful. And obviously, the will of the individual to be free is much more. In this sense, we are moving towards a currency competition scheme so that all Argentinians can use the currency that they want in their daily transactions, except for paying taxes for now. Actually, I mention all this to make it clear that growth is here to stay hand in hand with a fiscal surplus. In fact, recent studies show that a surplus of the characteristics that we have achieved from financial balance gives us basis for sustained growth of 4.5% per annual capital. That would imply that in 50 years Argentina could be catching up with the United States. And yes to that, let's say it is dynamic. And if we add to that what Justice did by lowering expenses, not raising taxes, if the 800 structural reforms and the 900 regulations are added, without a doubt, Argentina could grow much farther. And without a doubt, with the contributions that the brilliant head of the President of the Council of Advisors, Dr. Damian Rader, is making to advance the implementation of artificial intelligence in Argentina, we will undoubtedly achieve it much sooner. And to deepen growth, it is also essential to free ourselves from the restriction of foreign trade that is not squeezed today to be able to import and export more goods and services, moving from having a handful of regional clients to having almost 200 global clients. This will begin a growth process that will make us converge to the prosperity levels of the great powers, just as we knew how to do more than 100 years ago. For this reason, we are looking for our first step in the scenario to enact a free trade agreement with the United States and to take advantage of all our capabilities that are being wasted today. You can take advantage of our unique ecosystem diversity, which only 2 or 3 countries in the world can boast of, given that we have mountains, forests, glaciers, deserts, jungles, plains, lakes, estuaries, steppes, and expansive plains. Each of these biomes represent different potential opportunities. Without going any further, our mountains range has abundant lithium, silver, gold, copper, and uranium minerals that the global economy needs, and that due to the decision to expel investments and lack of long-term vision, today we export zero. On the 24th of today, the first steps were taken with an incentive regime for large investments that gave a logical fiscal and legal framework to investments of more than $200 million. This results in approval requests for more than $12 billion and announced for as many billions in sectors such as infrastructure, mining, energy, automotive, technology, oil and gas. In some sense, this regime is an asset of Asia, which is a tax system. Argentina should go reducing taxes by simplifying them, favoring innovation, the generation of wealth, and above all things, the accumulation of capital. For this very reason, and by way of closing, I would like to dedicate a few words. Defenders of freedom, do not stop being forced by the diatribes of collectivism that seeks to destroy any dissidence. Judgment, our ability to speak the truth. That is why they do not hate us. They invent laws to censor us. They seek to imprison us or exile us because they try to deny reality in order to support their lies. But what they will never be able to do is deny them overwhelming results of the reality. And a phrase that Mrs. used, which was Virgilio, that you don't have to be in the face of evil, you have to turn it into a force. And you know that because yesterday I stood up, and they will never be able to see the reality. A phrase that Mrs. used, which was from Virgilio, that you don't have to be in the face of evil, you have to turn it into a force. And you know that because yesterday I stood up to the evil in the dragon's own house.
Porque tal como se demostró en Alemania gracias a las ideas de Wilhelm Röpke, los milagros existen y alcanza con aplicar un modelo basado en algunas verdades elementales. Que el Estado tenga el tamaño que tenga no puede gastar más de lo que recauda con impuestos. La inflación, que es destructiva para una economía.
Because, as was demonstrated in Germany, thanks to the ideas of Wilhelm Röpke, miracles exist, and they are enough to apply a model based on some elementary truths, that the state has the size it has, and that is what is collected through taxes. The inflation that is destructive for an economy is a product of monetary issuance, and as such, to put an end to that, we do not have to issue more money. In fact, money should once again be private, just as Hayek preached. We must promote the state to be as small as possible so that society is as free as possible, and we must defend life, liberty and private property. If Western countries stick to this small set of basic ideas, I'm sure that our future will be more prosperous than our president. Thank you very much for this recognition. It's a real source of pride for me.
Voy a salir del protocolo. Perdón, Walter. Walter es my interpreter. Me es muy movilizador.
I'm going out of protocol.
Porque, digamos,
sorry, Walter.
Lo que a él lo llevó
Walter, he's my interpreter.
Profundamente la economía fue justamente la inflación. Y tuvo que desestimar.
It's very motivating. Röpke is very motivating for me. Because let's say what led him to study so deeply the economy was precisely inflation. And he had to dismiss the things that forced him to study and had to embrace new ideas. So when Argentina fell into hyperinflation in the year 1989, I was a football player at the time. Actually, I was a goalkeeper. Yes, a goalkeeper. And one day I was accompanying my mother to the supermarket. I was in the first year of economics at the university, and I saw that prices were rising and people were jumping on the products. And in that situation I said, either what I'm studying is wrong or I'm stupid. So the decent solution was to stop playing football and start studying economics seriously. And that obsession with economics led me to write my first academic article as a 20-year-old. It's called Hyperinflation and Market Distortion. And after that, the obsession never stopped again. And the big fight was to challenge all those stupid theories that have been defended in my country for nearly 80, 90 years. And this time we need to stand up straight and say that inflation is always a monetary phenomenon everywhere, and we are defeating inflation. Therefore, they want to kill themselves. Yes. And if the caste is afraid, why are they going to stay at work? And we need more unemployed politicians. And also I find the Röpke role that he plays is very attractive, because he tries to find the balance between theory, which implies politics, and what entails in terms of the social fabric, something that I'm trying to solve as successfully as possible. And if it doesn't work out, I will obviously be thrown out. So, above all things, I want to thank you, not only for the award, but also for this very, very warm reception. The truth is that
¡Viva la libertad, carajo! Muchas gracias.
That you have moved me, and I have no words of gratitude for so much generosity towards me. So I wish you a very nice afternoon, that God is with you, that the force of heaven guides us, and long live freedom, damn it! Viva la libertad, carajo! Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.